PADMA PURANA, Part 2, Om Shakti, Om Namo Narayana, Om Namah Shivaya. The female pig again. Sudeva traveled from kingdom to kingdom. She was poor and begged for a living, as best as she could. Eventually she arrived in the city of Vanasthala, in the kingdom of Saurashtra. Begging bowl in hand, she wandered around the city looking for alms. She soon came upon a palatial house with high walls. The house was full of granaries and obviously belonged to someone who was extremely wealthy. "I'm starving. May I have some alms, please?" begged Sudeva. The householder came out on hearing these words. His wife's name was Mangala. "Mangala," he called out to her, "someone is begging for food. Will you please give her something to eat?" Mangala gave Sudeva a lot of sweetmeats to eat. While Sudeva was eating this, the householder addressed her. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are you traveling alone and why you are in such a terrible state?" When Sudeva heard the householder's voice a second time, she realized that this was none other than her husband Shiva. She could not reply and hung her head in shame. "Why doesn't this woman reply?" Mangala asked her husband. "And why does she not look at you in the face?" "I will tell you the reason," said Shiva. "I have recognized her now. She is Sudeva, daughter of Vasudata. She is my wife. She must have come here looking for me. Please treat her well." Sudeva was amazed at these words. She had not expected such wonderful treatment at her husband's hands. Mangala also treated her exceedingly well. Repentance for her past misdeeds now overcame Sudeva, and so stricken was she that she died of the misery. As soon as Sudeva died, Yama's messengers came and tied her up. They then dragged her to Yama, the god of death. Yama metes out punishment in accordance with one's sins, and Sudeva's sins were indeed severe. She was sent from one hell to another. Sometimes her body was sliced with weapons, and other times she was boiled in oil. After she had served her sentence in these various hells, Sudeva was born again. But she was born as a termite. When the termite died, Sudeva was successively born as various other insects and animals, culminating in the female pig. "Now you know my story," the female pig told Queen Sudeva. "Please do something for me so that I do not have to suffer anymore. You are a woman who is devoted to her husband. You must have accumulated a lot of punya. King Ikshvaku is like the god Vishnu himself, and you are like the goddess Lakshmi. Please do something for me. I will grant you whatever punya I may have earned in the space of 1 year," replied the queen. As soon as these words were uttered, the female pig adopted the form of a divine woman, dressed in fantastic clothing and jewelry. A space Vihara Vimana descended from the sky and took her straight to heaven. Kaula amazed her friends with this story. Soon the story of Kaula's devotion to her husband spread far and wide. Kaula became famous not only among humans but among the gods as well. Indra, the king of the gods, decided to test Kaula. He sent a messenger to Kaula. "You are wasting your time," the messenger told Kaula. "Your husband has been away for 3 years. You think that he has gone to visit places of pilgrimage, but in reality he has deserted her. Why are you wasting your youth in the fruitless waiting? Marry my master instead. What is your master? Asked Sukawa. Ask him to appear before me. Indra then appeared before Sukawa in all his pomp and glory. He did the best to persuade Sukawa to marry him. But Sukawa spurned all Indra's advances. Not only did she not marry Indra, but she gave the king of the gods a long lecture on the duties of faithful wife. Meanwhile, Krikawa had more or less finished his pilgrimage and was on his way home. Suddenly a divine voice addressed him. Krikawa, said the voice, all your search for punya has been in vain. You have done this only to tickle your ego, but your ancestors will continue to rot in hell. Why should that be? Asked Krikawa. Why should my visit to all these sacred tirthas be in vain? That is because you did not take your wife with you, said the voice. A devoted wife must take part in all her husband's endeavors. Otherwise no punya is accumulated. A house where there is a devoted wife is superior to all the tirthas combined. Why did you leave your wife at home? Was that a proper thing to do? Hearing these words, Krikawa hastened home. Husband and wife embraced each other with delight, and they jointly performed a religious ceremony so that Krikawa's ancestors might be rescued from hell. Indra arrived to bless the couple. I tried to tempt Sukawa into marrying me. I was unsuccessful, he told Krikawa. Blessed is your wife. I wish to grant the two of you a boon. Please grant us the boon that we may never deviate from the righteous path, said the couple. Let us always be devoted to the gods and the sages. This boon was readily granted. The place where Sukawa and Krikawa lived is now famous tirtha, known as Nari Tirtha. Pippala. The sage Kashyapa had a son named Pippala. Pippala desired to attain powers that were unrivaled by anyone else in the universe. He therefore went to a forest named Dasharanya and began to meditate there. He meditated without any food or water. So amazing was the tapasya that the gods and the sages marveled to see what was happening. The passing of the seasons made no impression on Pippala. He sat there like a boulder and meditating. And 1,000 years passed in the fashion. Termites built a hill all around Pippala, but the sage was unmoved. Venomous snakes wounded themselves around Pippala's body and bit him. But Pippala did not even notice the snakes. Soon the power of the tapasya made Pippala's body radiant. Circles of energy hung around his body like a halo. Pippala lived only on air. After 3,000 years had passed in this way, the gods showered down flowers on Pippala. You have pleased us with your meditation, they said. Crave whatever boon you wish for. I desire the boon that all objects in the universe may obey my will, said Pippala. The gods granted this boon. Pippala was delighted with what he had achieved. He sat down near a pond and began to congratulate himself on his newly acquired powers. Surely there was no one else in the universe who could rival his powers. A crane was standing in the pond and it sensed Pippala's thoughts. You fool! The crane told Pippala, why are you so delighted with yourself? I don't think that you have achieved anything at all. You have wasted 3,000 years of tapasya. Sukarma is far more learned than you are, and he did not have to perform any difficult tapasya to become learned. Pippala was greatly surprised to hear a crane speak thus. Who are you? He asked the crane. Are you Brahma, Vishnu or Shiva? Why don't you go and ask Sukarma who I am? Retorted the crane. It also taught Pippala how to find Sukarma. There was a Brahmana named Kundala, and Sukarma was Kundala's son. Sukarma spent all his time in serving his aged parents. That was his sole purpose in life. It was to Kundala's hermitage that Pippala came in search of Sukarma. Sukarma welcomed Pippala with offerings. Great sage, he said, I am indeed gratified that you have come to pay us a visit. I know why you have come. You have spent 3,000 years in difficult tapasya, and gods have granted you the boon that you will be able to subjugate all the objects that are in the universe. Yet the crane told you that you are ignorant and know nothing at all. Who was that crane? Asked Pippala. That crane was the Brahman, replied Sukarma. Is there anything else that you wish to know? Can you also control all the objects in the universe? Asked Pippala. Judge for yourself, replied Sukarma. He called upon the gods to arrive before him. Indra and other gods immediately appeared before Sukarma to do his bidding. Why have you summoned us? They asked. Sukarma explained that he had done this to demonstrate to Pippala his powers. The gods blessed Sukarma that he would always be devoted to his parents. Sukarma also explained to Pippala that all his powers were due to his devotion to his parents. He performed no tapasya, he chanted no incantations. There were no tirthas that he had visited. The punya that could be acquired through performing yajnas could be bettered by serving one's parents faithfully. What was the point of studying the Vedas if one was not going to serve one's parents? This is knowledge that I can impart to you, Sukarma told Pippala, and if you wish, I will tell you the story of Yayati. Yayati's story. There was a king named Nahusha who was born in the lunar dynasty. Nahusha was a righteous king. He donated a lot of alms and performed many yajnas. Such was the power of his punya that he acquired the title of Indra and ruled over the gods in heaven. Nahusha had a son named Yayati, and when Nahusha went to heaven, the kingdom was handed over to Yayati. Yayati was a good king who ruled according to the dictates of dharma, righteousness. He took good care of his subject. Yayati had 4 sons, brave and learned. Their names was Ruru, Puru, Kuru and Yadu. For 81,000 years, Yayati ruled wisely and his fame spread far and wide. Indra got to know about Yayati and desired to meet him. Indra's chariot was named Matali. Indra sent Matali to Yayati so that the king might be brought to heaven. Matali tempted Yayati with the stories of the riches that heaven offered. But Yayati refused to go to heaven unless he could be taken there in his own physical body. He refused to die. Look at me, said Yayati. I am 150 years old, but there are no signs of old age. Thanks to the punya I have accumulated, I seem to be only 16 years of age. Why should I give up this body? As for riches, I have plenty of them here on earth. Matali reported to Indra what the king had told him. Meanwhile, Yayati instructed his subjects that they should all follow the path of dharma and worship Vishnu. The result was that all of Yayati's subjects became righteous. old age, disease and sorrow were banished from the earth. People stopped dying. Yama had no more work to do and was alarmed. He went and complained to Indra that his occupation was being threatened because of Yayati righteousness, as had become like heaven. Indra decided that Yayati would have to be tempted so that he might become evil and deviate from the righteous path. He sent god of love, Kandarpa, to accomplish this task. Because of Kandarpa's blandishments, Yayati gave up some of his clean ways. He forgot to bathe at the appointed hours. Seizing this opportunity, old age entered the king's body and Yayati became an old man. And once he had become an old man, he became more addicted to material pursuit. On one occasion, Yayati went to the forest on a hunt. While pursuing a deer, he came upon a beautiful pond inside the forest. Floating in the pond was a gigantic lotus, and seated on the lotus there was a beautiful woman. The woman was singing. So wonderful was her song that Yayati immediately fell in love with her. "Who are you?" asked Yayati. "I am the great Yayati, king in the lunar line. I have fallen in love with you. Please marry me." "My name is Ashravindumati," replied the woman. "The goddess of love is Rati and I am her daughter. I am waiting here for an appropriate husband, but I will not marry you. You are an old man. Become young and come here again and I shall certainly marry you." Yayati returned to his capital. He called his 4 sons to him and explained to them the problem. He wished that one of his sons might accept Yayati's age in exchange for his youth. This would enable Yayati to marry Ashravindumati. When Yayati got tired of the worldly life, he would return to the earth and take back his old age. With the exception of Puru, all the other sons refused to perform this exchange. They felt that if Yayati had become old, he had no business to marry again. Ruru, Kuru and Yadu were therefore cursed by Yayati that they would never inherit the kingdom. Their lands would be cursed and no kings would be born in them. As for Puru, he gave his father his youth and was blessed by the king. Yayati went back to the pond in his youthful form and met Ashravindumati. "Surely there is no problem in marrying me now," he said. "Yes, there is," replied Ashravindumati. "You have 2 other wives, Sharmishka and Devayani. Before marrying me, you have to give me your word of honor that you will no longer treat them as your wives. Moreover, you have to agree that you will always do my bidding." "I agree to these conditions," said Yayati. In fact, Yayati asked Yadu to kill Sharmishka and Devayani. When Yadu refused, he was cursed by Yayati that Yadu's descendants, the Yadavas, would become matriarchal. Now that her conditions were met, Ashravindumati married Yayati and the two lived happily for 20,000 years. Ashravindumati asked Yayati to organize an Ashwamedha Yajna, horse sacrifice. Yayati entrusted the task to his son Puru, and the ceremony was an outstanding success. After many years has passed, Ashravindumati told Yayati, "We have had enough of worldly pleasures. Let us now ascend to heaven." Yayati accordingly called Puru and returned him his youth. He accepted his old age. Then with Ashravindumati he died and went to heaven, after having profusely blessed Puru. One should be like Puru, Sukarma told Pippala. There is no punya that is superior to the serving one's parents. Chayavana. In the line of the great sage Bhrigu, there was a sage named Chayavana. Chayavana desired to attain true knowledge. He decided that the only way to attain true knowledge was by visiting famous tirthas. Chayavana therefore visited all the places of pilgrimage that were along the banks of the rivers Narmada, Saraswati and Godavari. His travels eventually brought him to a place named Amarakantaka, on the southern banks of the river Narmada. Chayavana was tired from his travels and he sat down to rest under a banyan tree. On that tree lived a learned parrot, Shuka. The parrot was named Kunjava. Kunjava had a wife and 4 sons. The sons were named Ujjvala, Samujjvala, Vijjvala and Kapinjava. Every morning the sons would go out to find food, and they would bring some back for their parents. It was evening when Chayavana sat down to rest under the tree. The sons had just returned from their foraging. After the family had fed, Kunjava asked Ujjvala, "Son, where did you go today? Tell us all that you saw and had." "I always go to Plakshadvipa in search of food," replied Ujjvala. "That region has many countries, mountains, rivers and forests. A king named Divyadevi ruled in Plakshadvipa. He has a beautiful daughter named Divyadevi. When the daughter had grown up, Divyadevi looked around for an appropriate son-in-law and decided to get his daughter married off to King Chitrasena of the kingdom known as Rupa. The engagement ceremony was held, but before the marriage could take place, Chitrasena died. "What I am to do now?" Divyadevi asked his ministers. "Since the marriage did not actually take place, Divyadevi can be married again," replied the ministers. "Please look for another groom." This time Divyadevi chose King Rupasena. The engagement ceremony was held, but before the marriage could take place, Rupasena died. Divyadevi looked for another groom, and the process went on 21 times. On each occasion the prospective bridegroom died before the marriage ceremony could take place. In desperation, King Divyadevi decided that his daughter would be married through a Swayamvara ceremony. In this ceremony, the bride chooses her own husband from among the inviters. All the kings and princes of Plakshadvipa were invited to this august gathering. But a strange incident took place on the occasion of the Swayamvara. The assembled kings and princes fell to fighting among themselves and killed one another. Divyadevi could not get married. She retired to the forest to meditate. "That is what I witnessed in Plakshadvipa," concluded Ujjvala. "Please tell us, Father, why Divyadevi was so unfortunate." "I will," replied Kunjava. "I know her story." Story of Divyadevi. There is a sacred city named Varanasi. In that city there lived a righteous Vaishyu named Sudhira. Sudhira's wife was called Chitra. Sudhira was rich and he was devoted to his wife. But Chitra was evil. She had no interest in performing deeds that brought punya. She disobeyed her husband and went against his wishes. One of her favorite pastimes was to criticize Sudhira. When she got tired of this, she visited all the neighbors, spreading gossip, enmity and jealousy. After a while, Sudhira could not stand this anymore. He married again. As for Chitra, she left Sudhira's house and began to associate with chiefs and robbers. She would be their messenger or spy and assist them in their burglaries and the murders they committed. When Chitra died, she was brought before Yama and made to suffer in several hells for her sins. When these terms of punishment were over, she was born again as Divyadevi. Since she had spent her early life in destroying other people's families and households, it was destined that she would not have a family at her own in this life. That is the reason why it proved to be impossible to get her married. There is still one thing that I do not understand, commented Ujjvala. If a Chitra Divyadevi was so evil, how did she come to be born as a daughter of King Devadasa? That must have required some punya. Yes, indeed, replied Kunjala. I forgot to mention that part. One day a mendicant came to the Sudhira's house, looking for alms. Chitra washed the sage's feet and gave him food. The punya that this act led to made sure that Chitra would be born as a princess. Do you have any more questions, my son? I do have a final question, said Ujjvala. How can Divyadevi get over her present predicament? How can she perform penance for her sins? There is no very difficult, replied Kunjala. She has to constantly pray to the great Vishnu and chant his name. There is no sure method of salvation. She should observe vratas, religious rites, that are sacred to Vishnu. Why don't you go and tell her this? That will bring her some punya as well. The next day Ujjvala went and told Divyadevi what his father had told him. Divyadevi prayed to Vishnu for 4 years and was freed of all her sins. What do you have to tell us? Kunjala asked Samujjvala. What have you seen or had? I always go to the Himalayas to look for food, replied Samujjvala. There is one particular valley there which is frequented by sages and apsaras. The lake Manasasaravara is there, and it is there that I went. As for what I have seen, I can make neither head nor tail out of it. But let me recount it for you. While Samujjvala waited by the lake, several swans arrived there. Some of the swans were black and others white. The white swans had black beaks and black legs. There were also some swans which were pure white and others which were blue. After the swans arrived, 4 women followed them there. These women were fierce of appearance. Their teeth jutted out and their hair stood up like spikes. The black swans descended into the water to the bath. The other swans did not bathe at all, but only circumambulated the lake. As for the women, they stood around and roared with laughter. While this was going on, a gigantic swarm emerged from Manasasaravara. It was followed by 3 other swans. These 4 swans took to their wings and flew away. The 4 women continued to hang around and roar with laughter. The other swans also waited. Meanwhile, a hunter arrived and sat down by the side of the lake. Soon the hunter's wife joined him there. But the hunter's wife did not recognize the hunter. He was much changed from when she had seen him last. He had become handsome and shone with radiance. But the hunter recognized his wife and addressed her. "Don't you recognize me?" he asked. "Why are you going away without offering me some food? I am very hungry." "You can't possibly be my husband," replied the hunter's wife. "My husband was fierce and dark. You are pleasant of appearance and fair. How can you possibly be my husband?" "Believe me, I am your husband," said the hunter. "I was tired of looking for game. I therefore went and bathed in the tirtha that is known as Narmada Sangama, at the confluence of the river Narmada and Reva. As soon as I bathed there, my appearance was magically transformed. Come with me and I will take you there. The hunter and his wife left for the confluence of a sacred rivers Narmada and Reva. The swans and the 4 women also followed them. Stirred with the curiosity, Samujvala accompanied them. At the sacred tirtha, the hunter's wife bathed in the water and became divine in the appearance. The swans too bathed in the water. Those which were black became white as snow after bathing. The 4 black swans, which had early left Manasa Saravara, also came there and bathed in the water. They too turned pure white. As for the 4 fierce women, they fell down and died. I can make no sense of this incident, said Samujvala. Can you explain it for me? I certainly can, replied Kunjala. Once the sage Narada went to visit Indra in heaven. Indra welcomed Narada and asked, How are you, great sage? Where have you been traveling? I visited all the tirthas, replied Narada. Since you have visited them all, please tell me this, which is the best of all the tirthas? Asked Indra. I don't know the answer to that question, replied Narada. All the tirthas are sacred. Indra thereupon summoned all the tirthas to his court, and they all arrived there, each looking more resplendent than the other. Among these tirthas were Ganga, Narmada, Punya, Chandrabhaga, Saraswati, Divika, Bimbika, Kubja, Prasidha, Kunjala, Manjula, Ramha, Bhanumati, Sugragrahara, Shona, Sindhu Sabubira, Kaveri, Kapila, Kumuda, Veda, Maheshwari, Charmanvati, Lopa, Sukushiti, Suhamsi, Hamsapada, Hamsavega, Manaradha, Surudha, Svaruna, Vena, Bhadravena, Supadmini, Nahali, Sumaricha, Pulindika, Hema, Divya, Chandrika, Veda Samkrama, Jvala, Hutashani, Svaha, Kala, Kapilika, Svadha, Sukala, Linga, Gandhira, Bhimavahini, Devadrichi, Viravaha, Laksha, Homa, Agahapaha, Akhapaha, Parashari, Hemagarbha, Subhadra and Vasuputrika. These were merely the rivers. There were several cities as well. Among them were Prayaga, Pushkara, Varanasi, Dvarakapati, Prabhasa, Avanti, Naimisha, Maharantna, Chandaka, Maheshwara, Baleshwara, Kalinjara, Brahmashetra, Madhura, Manavahaka, Maya and Kanti. The tirthas saluted Indra and asked, King of the gods, we have all come. Why have you summoned us? What can we do for you? I wish to know which among you is superior to all others, said Indra. There are some things which are really serious. Examples would be the killing of cows, the killing of women, the defense of one's husband, drinking wine, stealing gold, criticizing one's teacher, being a traitor to one's friends, breaking the images of the gods, as sung, and running away from the field of battle. Which amongst you are powerful enough to clean such sins? We are not all equally powerful or equally sacred, answered the tirthas, but the most sacred undoubtedly are Prayaga, Pushkara, Arhya-tirtha and Varanasi. In fact, there is a story connected with the tirthas. Many years ago there was a kshatriya, second of the 4 classes, named Vidura in the land of Panchala. In a fit of anger, Vidura killed a Brahmana. This was a very serious sin. Vidura visited several tirthas, but his sin would not be pardoned. Vidura's travels brought him to the land of Malava, where there lived a Brahmana. Vidura and Chandrasharma started to travel together. In the course of their travels, they met another Brahmana named Vedasharma. This person had committed the sin of marrying someone he should not have married. His sin had also not been pardoned. Also, he had visited many tirthas. Vidura, Chandrasharma and Vedasharma began to travel as a group. The three encountered a Vaishya named Vanjua. This character has been a drunkard, and his sin had also not been pardoned. Vanjua journeyed Vidura, Chandrasharma and Vedasharma. The four sinners eventually met a sage and asked him how they might be pardoned their sins. Why don't you go and visit Prayaga, Pushkara, Argyatirtha and Varanasi? Asked the sage. I am certain that your sins will be pardoned then. The four sinners did as the sage had asked them to, but their sins were not pardoned. In fact, so severe were their sins that the four tirthas became contaminated in the process. The four tirthas adopted the form of four black swans and began to follow the sinners around. The sinners went to many other tirthas, but whenever they bathed in any specific tirtha, the tirtha became contaminated, adopted the form of a black swan, and followed them. Tirthas which had not been contaminated also followed the group. These were the white swans. Soon there were 64 tirthas in the form of swans traveling with the group. The group eventually made its way to the great tirtha known as Manasa Saravara. But as soon as sinners bathed in the lake, Manasa Saravara became contaminated and adopted the form of a gigantic black swan. Eventually the group made its way to the confluence of the rivers Narmada and Reva. When the four sinners bathed there, their sins were pardoned. The tirthas too, in the forms of black swans, bathed there and were cleansed of all contamination. They became white swans. As for the four fierce women, these were the personification of their four sins. As soon as the sinners were pardoned, the four women died. Also Prayaga, Pushkara, Argyatirtha and Varanasi are great place of pilgrimage. The most sacred tirtha of all is the confluence of the rivers Narmada and Reva. This is known as Kubja Tirtha. Kunjava recounted this incident and said, Son, what your witnesses must have become clear to you now. It was only an allegory. What about you, Vijvava? Asked Kunjava. Do you have something wonderful to tell us as well? Indeed I do, replied Vijvava. Vijvava usually went to look for food in the neighborhood of Mount Shumeru. In that region there was a wonderful forest named Anandakanana. It was full of fruits and flowers and divine trees. Apsaras and Gandharvas came there to frolic. The Vimansas of the gods descended there off and on. In Anandakanana forest there was also a beautiful lake. Lotuses and swans abounded in the lake. While Vijvava was waiting there, he saw a shining Vimana descend. In the Vimana was a divine-looking couple. They were handsome and richly clothed. The couple got down from the Vimana and advanced to the edge of the water. They bathed in the lake and picked up a pair of swords. It was then that Vijvava noticed two dead bodies lying by the side of the lake. Wonder of wonders, the male dead body looked exactly like the man who had descended from the Vimana, and the female dead body looked exactly like the woman who had got down from the Vimana. The woman sliced up some of the meat from the female dead body and began to eat it. That man did so well as well. Also he took his portion from the male dead body. While they were eating, two beautiful women arrived and began to laugh at the eaters. Two fierce and ugly-looking women also arrived and kept saying, "Give me some, give me some." After the couple had had their fill, they drank water from the lake, got into the Vimana and left. The four other women also left. As soon as they had left, the corpses were replenished. That is, whatever meat had been eaten from them was restored. Vijvala witnesses this strange happening take place day after day. "What does it mean, Father?" he asked. "Who are the divine-looking couple who alighted from the Vimana? Who are the beautiful two women who laughed at them? And who are the two fierce women who keep asking them for food?" There was the story that Kunjala told his family. In Chola kingdom there was a king named Suvahu. He was handsome, righteous, and possessed many good qualities. He was also devoted to Vishnu. No one on earth could acquire his devotion to Vishnu. Suvahu's wife was named Tarkshya. Suvahu performed many yajnas, but Suvahu's priest Jaimini was not satisfied with what Suvahu had done. "King," said Jaimini, "please give me some alms. That is what grants undying punya." "What use will the punya be for me?" asked Suvahu. "I will enable you to go to heaven," replied Jaimini. "Heaven is a wonderful place." "That may be," said the king, "but will I be able to live in heaven forever?" "Of course not," replied Jaimini. "You will be able to live in heaven only so long as your punya is not exhausted. The moment your punya is exhausted, you will be born on earth again." "In the case I am not interested in giving alms," said Suvahu. "Why should I be interested in such transient happiness? I will pray to Vishnu, and by his grace I will get to live in his abode in Vishnu Loka Vaikuntha. That will be far superior to living in heaven." The king did as he had suggested. Together with his wife, he began to perform very difficult tapasya and prayed to Vishnu. The upshot was that then Suvahu and Tarkshya died. They were brought straight to Vishnuloka. Vishnuloka was a wonderful place, but try as they might, the king and the queen did not get to see Vishnu. Moreover, they started to suffer from hunger and thirst, as there was no food or water to be had. While they were looking for food to assuage their hunger and water to quench their thirst, they came upon the hermitage of sage named Vamadeva. "Great sage," asked Suvahu, "what is happening to us? Why are we suffering thus?" "You and your wife have been truly devoted to Vishnu," replied Vamadeva, "but you have never given any alms. The best form of donation is the donation of food and water. Since you never donated these, you have to face hunger and thirst in Vishnuloka. Is there no way I can perform penance for my sin?" asked Suvahu. "There certainly is," replied the sage. "Go to the place where the dead bodies of you and your wife are lying on earth. Those dead bodies have not got decomposed. Eat the flesh from your own dead bodies. Keep doing this until someone recites for you the hymn stotra that is sacred to Vishnu. The day you hear that hymn will be the day of your salvation." This was the explanation of what Vijvala had witnesses. It was Suvahu and Tarkshya eating up their own dead bodies. As for the two beautiful women who laughed at them, they were the personification of prana, of prajna, knowledge, and shraddha, faith. Prajna, Shraddha laughed at the king and the queen because by failing to donate alms, they had missed out on true knowledge and true faith. The two fierce women who kept saying, "Give me some," were the personification of hunger and thirst. "What about their salvation?" asked Vijvala. "Please teach me the hymn that is sacred to Vishnu. I would like to recite it to Suvahu and Tashya so they may attain salvation." Kunjala taught his son the hymn. Vijvala went and recited it before the royal couple and thus freed them from their sin. It was now time for the fourth son, Kapinjala, to recount any wonderful sight that he might have seen. Kapinjala was in the habit of going to Mount Kailasa to look for food. Mount Kailasa was a beautiful place and the sacred river Ganga flowed right through it. Thousands and thousands of other rivers were also flowed through the region. The valleys were full of limpid ponds. There was one particular lake which was gigantic. Lotuses bloomed on its surface in profusion. Next to the lake was a boulder. Kapinjala saw that on the boulder was seated a beautiful woman. The woman sat on the boulder and kept on crying. Drops of her tears fell into the water of the lake and turned it into fragrant lotuses. There was also a temple of Shiva on the shore of the lake. Kapinjala also saw a sage who worshipped Shiva in the temple. The sage lived only on dry leaves so that his physique resembled that of a skeleton. The lotuses that emerged from the teardrops were collected by the sage and offered to Shiva's image. After the offerings were made, the sage danced and sang hymns in praise of Shiva. Then he sat down and cried. "Father, what is this strange mystery?" asked Kapinjala. "Who is the beautiful woman and why does she cry? And who is the sage and why does he worship Shiva? Do you know the answers to this question?" "I do," replied Kunjala. Shiva and Parvati lived on Mount Kailasa. There was a beautiful grove known as Nandana-Kanana, and one day Parvati expressed a desire to visit that grove. Shiva gladly took Parvati to the grove. The grove was full of all kinds of wondrous trees, and Parvati admired them all. But there was one particular tree which seemed to be superior to all the others. "What tree is this?" asked Parvati. "This is known as the Kalpa Vriksha," replied Shiva. "That means that this tree will furnish whatever object one wishes for." "Is that really true?" said Parvati. "Let me try it out." Parvati wished that the tree might provide a beautiful woman. As soon as she expressed this wish, a beautiful woman emerged from the tree. She was so pretty that no description can do complete justice to her. The woman paid her respects to Parvati and asked, "Why did you create me? What are your orders?" "I had actually created you to satisfy my curiosity," answered Parvati. "But now that you have been created, let me name you Ashoka Sundari. There will be a king named Nahusha, who will be born in the lunar line. He will be your husband." Ashoka Sundari started to live in Nandana-Kanana. There was a Ganava demon named Viprachiti, and he had a son known as Hunda. Hunda happened to go to Nanda-Kanana and meet Ashoka Sundari. He promptly fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. But Ashoka Sundari flatly refused to marry Hunda. She had been told by Parvati that King Nahusha would be her husband, and she would merit no other. Vihunda, however, was not one to give up so easily, and he resorted to an artifice. Demons are skilled in the usage of Maya illusions. Through Maya, demons could also transform themselves into some other form. Vihunda adopted the form of a beautiful woman and appeared before Ashoka Sundari. "Who are you?" asked Ashoka Sundari. "I am an unhappy widow. My husband has been killed by the evil demon Vihunda," replied Vihunda. "I am not performing tapasya so that Vihunda may be killed. Why don't you come and join me in my hermitage on the banks of the Ganga?" Ashoka Sundari accompanied the woman to her so-called hermitage. But as soon as they were there, Vihunda adopted his own form and tried to abduct Ashoka Sundari. Ashoka Sundari repulsed this attempt. "Evil demon," she said, "how dare you try to abduct me? I will perform tapasya so that my husband Nahusha may kill you." While all this was going on, Nahusha had not yet been born. He was destined to be born as the son of King Ayu and Queen Indumati. But at the time when Vihunda was trying to abduct Ashoka Sundari, Ayu was still without a son. To obtain a son, the king prayed to the sage Dattatreya for 100 years. He obtained the boon that he would have a powerful and righteous son. Vihunda had not forgotten that Ayu's son would kill him. So as soon as the baby was born, the demon kidnapped the boy and brought him home. He gave the baby to his cook with the instructions that the baby was to be killed and served up to Vihunda for dinner. However, the cook was a good sort who took pity on the baby. He killed the deer and served it to Vihunda, pretending that it was the prince who had been killed and cooked. What was to be done with the baby? The cook went and left him in the Vasishka's hermitage. Vasishka discovered the boy and began to bring him up. The word Husha means fright. Since the boy would never be frightened, Vasishka named him Nahusha, or fearless. The sage taught Nahusha all that there was to be learned, including the usage of weapons. When Nahusha grew up, Vasishka told him about his antecedents. He also told Nahusha about Vihunda and Ashoka Sundari, and the fact that he was destined to kill Vihunda and marry Ashoka Sundari. Nahusha set out to battle with Vihunda. So delighted were the gods that the evil demon was going to be killed, that they offered Nahusha all the weapons. Indra loaned him his chariot to ride in. Vihunda's capital was in Nandana Kanana. Nahusha went there and killed the demon after a fierce battle. He met Ashoka Sundari and married her. He was also reunited with his parents. In due course, Nahusha and Ashoka Sundari had a son named Yayati. "But you have still not told me the identity of the beautiful woman who was crying," said Kapinjala. "Have you told me who the sage who worshipped Shiva was?" "I was coming to that," replied Kunjala. The demon Vihunda had a son named Vihunda. When Vihunda died, Vihunda was despondent. He realized that Nahusha had killed his father with the connivance of the gods and decided that he would perform tapasya so as to destroy them. So terrible was this tapasya that the gods got scared and fled to Vishnu. "Please save us from the demon," said the god. "Don't worry," replied Vihunda. "I will bring about Vihunda's downfall. Vishnu adopted the form of a beautiful woman and started to live in Nandana Kanana. When Vihunda caught sight of the woman, he was stricken with love for her. "Please marry me," he said. "I certainly will," replied Vishnu. "There is, however, a condition. You will first have to worship Shiva with the 7 crores of Kamoda flowers. Once that has been done, you will have to make a garland of these flowers and give it to me. I will marry you then." Vihunda agreed to this condition, but try as he might, he could not find any Kamoda tree from which Kamoda flowers might be obtained. No one seemed to know anything about such a tree. Finally, Vihunda resorted to sage Shukracharya, who is all-knowing. "A Kamoda flower is not obtained from a tree," said Shukracharya. "There is a woman named Kamoda. When she is laughed, fragrant yellow flowers emerge from her laughter. If one worships Shiva with these flowers, all one's wishes are fulfilled. But when Kamoda cries, the flowers that emerge are odorless and red. This should never be touched." "What is this woman Kamoda?" asked Vihunda. And where do I find her?" "She can be found on the banks of the Ganga," replied Shukracharya. "As for who she is, she was born from the churning of the ocean." The gods had no intention of allowing Vihunda to obtain the flowers that emerged when Kamoda laughed. Their plan was that the demon would use the flowers that emerged when Kamoda cried and thus bring about his own downfall. They therefore sent the sage Narada to Vihunda. Narada pursued Vihunda, and there was no need to go to the place where Kamoda was to obtain the flowers. The flowers would float by on the water of the Ganga, and all that the demon would have to do was to collect them as they passed by. Narada then plotted to make Kamoda cry. He went and told her that Vishnu was about to be born on earth in one of his incarnations. The thought of Vishnu leaving heaven so depressed Kamoda that she started to cry. Flowers emerged from these tears and floated down the Ganga to where Vihunda was waiting. Not realizing that these were flowers that had emerged from tears and not from laughter, Vihunda collected and used them to worship Shiva. This act so angered the goddess Parvati that she slew Vihunda with a sword. "Now you have the explanation for what you saw," said Kunjava. "I hope you have not forgotten that the sage Chayavana had overheard all of this sitting under the banyan tree." He now addressed Kunjava. "Pardon me for interrupting," said Chayavana, "but how came you to be so learned?" "I shall tell you my story," replied Kunjava. "There was a learned Brahmana named Vidyadhara. He had 3 sons, Vashu-sharma, Nama-sharma, and Dharma-sharma. Vasu-sharma and Nama-sharma followed in the footsteps of their father. They followed the dictates of Dharma and studied the sacred text. But Dharma-sharma displayed no such inclination. He spent his time in idle pursuit. The upshot was that people started to shun Dharma-sharma. When this became fairly serious, Dharma-sharma felt ashamed and decided to look around for a teacher who would be able to teach him all that there was known. He did come across such a teacher soon, and Dharma-sharma became really learned. A hunter once brought a baby parrot to Dharma-sharma, and the Brahmana became extremely attached to the parrot. When the bird was killed by Kate, Dharmasharma's sorrow knew no bounds. He sorrowed over the parrot and died. Since he had been thinking of a parrot, when he died, Dharmasharma was born as a parrot in his next life. That parrot is none other than I, said Kunjala. The Padma Purana subsequently has several sections on the geography of the earth and on various tirthas. This we will skip over as they can be found in many other Puranas. Gandharvas are singers of heaven. There were the 5 Gandharvas who had one daughter each. The daughter of the Gandharva Shuka Sangiti was Pramohini, Sushila's daughter was Sushila, Sharavedi's daughter was Sushwara, Chandrakanta's daughter was Sutara, and Suprabha's daughter was Chandrika. These 5 daughters were exceedingly pretty. They were also very good friends. In the month of Vaishakha, the 5 friends decided to worship the goddess Parvati. They therefore went to the forest to collect flowers in the forest. There was a beautiful lake. The 5 friends bathed in the lake and collected lotus flowers. They then built a clay image of the goddess and started to worship it. The sage Vedanidhi had a son named Tirtha Pravara, and Tirtha Pravara was also a sage. While the 5 daughters of the Gandharvas were praying, Tirtha Pravara happened to come up on the skin. Tirtha Pravara was so handsome that the Gandharva girls immediately fell in love with him. They figured that Parvati must have been satisfied with their praise and sent Tirtha Pravara as their husband. Please marry us, they told the sage. I can't marry you, replied Tirtha Pravara. I am engaged in performing difficult tapasya. While that is going on, it is forbidden for me to marry. But Pramohini and her friends continued to pester the sage. Tirtha Pravara was, however, well versed in the use of Maya. He used the power and disappeared. When the sage did not reappear, the women mournfully went back to their homes. Next day they returned again to the forest, and when they encountered Tirtha Pravara, they again kept on pressing him to marry them. This time Tirtha Pravara lost his temper. He cursed Pramohini and her friends that all 5 of them would turn into Pishachis, female demons. We did you no harm, said the woman. We only expressed our love for you and desired to marry you. Yet you have responded by cursing us. We therefore curse you that you will turn into a demon Pishacha. This cursed, there were 6 demons wandering around the lake. They lived there and foraged for food. After several years had passed, the sage Lamasha happened to visit the forest. The hungry demons immediately concluded that food was at hand and attacked the sage. But the sage Lamasha was so powerful that the demons could not get near him. They then bowed down before Lamasha and worshipped him. How may we be freed from our present forms? They asked. Go and bathe in the waters of the sacred river Reva, replied Lamasha. The demons did as the sage had asked them to, and regained their early forms. Such are the wonderful virtues of the holy river Reva. Many years ago in Satya Yuga there lived a Vaishyu named Hemakundala. He followed the path of Dharma and was devoted to gods and Brahmanas. His occupations were trade and animal husbandry. and he accumulated a lot of wealth in the pursuit. His total wealth soon amounted to 8 crores of gold coins. Hemakundala became old and lost his hearing. Realizing that his days on earth were numbered, he decided that he should devote himself more to the path that brought punya. He set aside 1/6 of his wealth for such pursuit. With this money he built temples, dug ponds and planted trees. He also donated a lot of money as alms. Hemakundala had two sons named Shrikundala and Vikundala. The Vaishyu had such a lot of wealth that there was plenty left over even after performing good deeds. He divided this money amongst his two sons and retired to the forest to meditate. Shrikundala and Vikundala were young and rich. They therefore soon lost their heads. Instead of sticking to the righteous path, they fell upon evil ways and devoted themselves to idle pursuit. They soon squandered away all this money in learning dissolute lives. When their money was all spent, their false friend deserted them, and Shrikundala and Vikundala had to live a life of penury. Unable to bear the pangs of hunger, the two brothers went to the forest and became hunters. They hunted game for food. While they were in the forest, Shrikundala was killed by a tiger and Vikundala died of snake bite. Since they died at the same time, they were brought before Yama together. Take Shrikundala to the most severe of hells, Yama instructed his messengers, and take Vikundala to heaven. Yama's words greatly mystified Vikundala. To the messenger who was to take him to heaven, he queried, "How is it possible? We brothers have been born in the same family. We have performed our evil acts together. We have died accidental deaths at the same time. How is it that then my brother should go to hell and I to heaven? I see no reason why I should be so rewarded." "What you say is true," replied the messenger, "but there is something that you have forgotten. Let me refresh your memory for you. You had a Brahmana friend named Swamitra. He had a hermitage on the banks of the river Yamuna. You went to visit him once and bathed in the tirtha known as Papa Pranashana. It is thanks to that punya that all your sins have been forgiven and you are going to heaven. As for your brother, he did not bathe in this tirtha. He was to rot in the hell. That is not acceptable," said Vikundala. "Surely there must be some way of saving my brother." "There is," replied the messenger. 8 lives early you accumulated a lot of punya. If you transfer that punya to your brother, he will be freed from hell." "What was that punya?" asked Vikundala. "I don't remember." "Many years ago there was a sage named Shakuni," said messenger. "He had 9 sons. 4 of these sons, Nirmoha, Dhyanakashtha, Jitakama, and Gunadhika, became sage. They spent their time in meditation. Once they happened to visit a city in a search for alms. 8 lives ago you lived in that city as a Brahmana. You not only gave the sage alms, you made them welcome under your roof. That was the punya I mentioned. If you transfer this to your brother, he will ascend to heaven." Vikundala gladly transferred the punya to Shrikundala. Shrikundala was freed from hell and both brothers went to heaven together. Such is a wonderful story of Vikundala. The 18 sacred Puranas correspond to parts of Vishnu's body. Each Purana is associated with one part of Vishnu's anatomy. The Brahma Purana, this his head. The Padma Purana, the heart. The Vishnu Purana, the right arm. The Shiva Purana, the left arm. The Bhagavata Purana, the thighs. The Narada Purana, the navel. The Markandeya Purana, the right foot. The Agni Purana, the left foot. The Bhavishya Purana, the right knee. The Brahma Vaivarta Purana, the left knee. The Linga Purana, the right calf. The Varaha Purana, the left calf. The Skanda Purana, body hair. The Vamana Purana, the skin. The Kurma Purana, the back. The Matsya Purana, the fat of the body. The Garuda Purana, the marrow. The Brahmanda Purana, the bones. All of these texts are sacred, and reading them brings a lot of punya. In the last Dvapara Yuga there was a chief named Dandaka. He stole the property of Brahmanas, was a traitor of his friends, lied all the time, and was very cruel. He ate beef for his food and drank wine instead of water. Dandaka once went to one of Vishnu's temple to steal the property that was in the temple. His feet were muddy and he wiped them on the threshold before entering the temple. This act had an effect that was certainly not what Dandaka had intended. The threshold was dirty, and when the Dandaka wiped his feet on the threshold, some of the dust that was there got cleaned. The main chamber of the temple had a solid wooden door that Dandaka broke open with an iron rod. Inside was an image of Vishnu. The chief did not think that the image itself would be of any use to him. But there were several other valuable objects of gold and silver in the chamber. Dandaka proceeded to tie this up in a piece of cloth. But in the process of doing this, he managed to drop a few of the objects, and this made a terrible racket. The noise brought the girls running to see what was happening. Dandaka fled, and in his hurry he stepped on a poisonous snake, which promptly bit him. Thus it was that Dandaka died and was brought before Yama. Yama's court has an officer named Chitragupta. He keeps accounts of all the good deeds and all the things that a person commits on earth. When Dandaka was brought before Yama, Yama asked Chandragupta to tell him what the chief record showed. This fellow was a chief, said Chitragupta. In fact, there is no conceivable sin that he has not committed. However, he performed one good deed, and such was the punya from that deed that it has more than atoned for all the sins Dandaka had committed. He cleaned some dust from the threshold of Vishnu's temple. As soon as Chitragupta said this, Yama descended from his throne and worshipped Dandaka. He realized that there was no question of sending Dandaka to hell. The only place that was fit for Dandaka was Vishnu's abode, in Vishnu-loka. There it was that Dandaka was sent. Such are the wonderful effects of cleaning Vishnu temple. In Treta Yuga, there lived a Brahmana named Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha was extremely devoted to Vishnu. He once lit up a lamp in one of Vishnu's temple. Having lit the lamp, he went home. Clarified butter had been used by Vaikuntha for lighting the lamp. The smell of the clarified butter attracted a rat, and the rat started to eat the butter. In the process, the lamp shook and the flame was brightened. It shone more clearly on Vishnu's image and dispelled some of the darkness that was engulfing the image. Eventually the rat was bitten by a snake. Yama sent his messengers to bring the rat, and they tied it up with a noose and ropes. But as they prepared to drag the rat to Yama's abode, Vishnu's messengers arrived. "How dare you bind up this rat up?" asked Vishnu's messengers. "Do you know that you are not supposed to touch those who are devoted to Vishnu?" This rat dispelled some of the darkness from Vishnu's image. He is therefore one of Vishnu's devotees. "Leave him alone. He is going to go to Vishnu Loka with us. All his sins have been pardoned." The rat was taken to Vishnu Loka. He lived there happily for years and years. Subsequently, he was born as a princess. Such are the wonderful effects of lighting up Vishnu's image. In Treta Yuga, there was a king named Shridhara. His wife was known as Hemaprabhavati. The king and queen were prosperous, but they were not happy. The reason for their unhappiness was that they did not have any son. King Shridhara once happened to meet the sage Vedavyasa. "Why do I not have a son?" asked the king. "I will tell you your story," replied the sage. In early life, Shridhara used to be a Brahmana named Chandra, and Queen Hemaprabhavati was Chandra's wife, her name being Shankari. Chandra and Shankari were once traveling somewhere, and they passed a small boy drowning in a pond. Since they were in a hurry, they did not stop to rescue the boy. "It is because of these sins that you do not have a son," said Vedavyasa. "Can nothing be done about this?" asked the king. "Donate pumpkins and clothing to Brahmanas," said Vedavyasa. "Give them gold and cows. Listen to recitals of the Puranas. I am certain that you will then have a son." Shridhara and Hemaprabhavati followed the sage advice. They had a handsome son. The act of donation never goes unrewarded. A vrata, religious rite observed on the birthday of Radha, is sacred. Many years ago, there was a woman named Lilavati. She was evil and never paid any attention to performing good deeds. This woman once happened to come upon a temple where various devotees were performing a vrata known as Radhashtami. Flowers, clothing, incense, and food were being offered to an image of Radha. Some devotees were singing, others were dancing, and still others were chanting incantations. "What are you people doing?" asked Lilavati. "Radha was born in the month of Bhadra during Shukla Paksha and on Ashtami Tithi," replied the devotees. "Today is the day and we are observing a vrata so that our sins may be pardoned." "I too will observe the vrata," responded Lilavati. A Tithi is a lunar day and Ashtami is the 8th lunar day of worshipping goddess Radha. Subsequently, Lilavati died of snake bite, and Yama's messengers came and tried to drag her to Yama's abode. But while they were doing this, Vishnu companions arrived and told Yama's messengers that they could not take Lilavati to Yama's abode. Lilavati had observed Radhashtami Vrata, and all her sins had thus been forgiven. Lilavati went straight to Vishnu Loka. Such are the wonderful effects of observing Radhashtami Vrata. Lakshmi Vrata. In Dvapara Yuga there was a king named Bhadrashrava. He lived in the land of Saurashtra. The king was learned in the Vedas. Bhadrashrava's wife was named Surati Chandrika. The king and the queen had 7 sons. Later a daughter named Shyamabhava was born to them. Shyamabhava once went with her friends to play on the shores of the ocean. While Shyamabhava was away, Lakshmi arrived at the palace. Lakshmi is a goddess of wealth and prosperity. She is also Vishnu's consort. Lakshmi appeared in disguise of an old Brahmana woman and said to the sentry guarding the door, "I wish to meet Surati Chandrika." "Why do you wish to meet the queen?" asked the sentry. "Who are you? What is your name and where do you live?" "My name is Kamala," replied Lakshmi. "My husband is called Bhuvanesha. My husband lives in the city known as Dvaravati. I wish to remind the queen of her early history." Since Lakshmi was in disguise, she was being indirect. Kamala is one of her names. Kamala is lotus flower and Lakshmi is known as Kamalatmika because she is seated on a lotus. Bhuvanesha means the Lord of the world. And Dvaravati or Dwaraka is the city that Krishna built. The story that Lakshmi told the sentry is as follows. In early life, Surati Chandrika was born as a Vaishya woman. But she was not very happy. She quarreled with her husband and left her husband's house. Lakshmi met this unhappy woman and told her to perform a religious rite known as Lakshmi vrata. This vrata brought a lot of punya, and thanks to the punya this obtained, the Vaishya woman spent many years in Vishnuloka after her death. For each time that Vaishya woman observed the vrata, she spent 1,000 years in Vishnuloka. When the punya was exhausted, the woman was born as Surati Chandrika. "I have come to remind you, queen, of this," continued Lakshmi. "She is wealthy now and has become proud and vain. She no longer observes the Lakshmi vrata. That is unfortunate indeed." "What is this vrata?" asked the sentry. "When should it be performed?" "The rite has to be observed in the month of Margashirsha," replied Lakshmi. "Rice pudding mixed with the camphor has to be offered to Vishnu and Lakshmi. For 4 days one has to pray to Lakshmi continuously with offerings of wheat, curds, fruit and flowers." The sentry asked Lakshmi to wait and went to summon the queen. Surati Chandrika did not recognize Lakshmi to be the goddess. When the Brahmana woman offered the queen advice, Surati Chandrika struck the woman and showed her away. While the Brahmana woman was living, she met Shyamabhava, who was then returning. Finding that the Brahmana woman was weeping, Shyamabhava asked her what the matter was. Upon hearing the whole story, the princess decided to observe the vrata herself. Years later, Shyamabhava was married to Maladhara, the son of King Siddheshwara. As soon as Shyamabhava left for husband's house, prosperity disappeared from the household of Bhadrashrava and Surati Chandrika. Things came to such a pass that the king and the queen were almost starving. Bhadrashrava went to pay his daughter a visit, and Shyamabhava was aghast at what had happened. After having fed her father, she gave him a lot of wealth to take home. Bhadrashrava took this wealth home, but as soon as he entered his own house, the wealth turned into lumps of coal. This time, Surati Chandrika went to visit her daughter. The time of this visit coincided with the designated time for observing Lakshmi vrata, and Shyamabhava forcibly made her mother observe the rite. Lo and behold, When Surati Chandrika returned home, she found that all the wealth and prosperity had been restored. Such as the wonderful effects of observing Lakshmi Vrata. In Dvapara Yuga there was a powerful king named Adinatha. Unfortunately, the king did not have any son. He asked the sage Galava how he might have a son. Perform a yajna, instructed Galava, and offer a human sacrifice. If the sacrificed human is perfect in every way, you will certainly have a son. The king sent his messengers to look for a human sacrifice, who was handsome, young and fair. These messengers traveled far and wide. Eventually they came to a village known as Dashapura, where the people were exceedingly handsome, and where there lived a Brahmana named Krishnadeva. His wife was called Sushiva. Krishnadeva and Sushiva had 3 sons. The messenger asked the Brahmana and his wife to part with one of their sons and offered 4 lakhs of gold coins in return. When the Brahmana couple refused, the messenger started to abduct one of the sons by force. Seeing that they were helpless, Krishnadeva and Sushiva prayed that their eldest and youngest son might be spared. The remaining son was seized by the king's messengers. They left the gold and departed. Krishnadeva and Sushiva sorrowed so much for their lost son that they became blind. While the king's messengers were returning to Dinanatha, they passed the sage's Vishwamitra's hermitage. "Where are you going?" asked the sage, "and who is this Brahmana lad?" The messengers told Vishwamitra the story. "Spare the lad," said Vishwamitra. "He has a life to live and survive. He is still young. Take me instead. I will be the sacrifice." The king's messengers refused. They thought that Vishwamitra was too old to be a good sacrifice. Vishwamitra therefore accompanied them to King Dinanatha. He persuaded the king to have the ceremony without the human sacrifice. Vishwamitra himself would guarantee that the king would have a son. In due course, a son was born to the king. As for the Brahma's son, Vishwamitra took him back to Krishnadeva and Sushiva. So great was their happiness at getting their son back that their eyesight were immediately restored. Vishwamitra was indeed a great sage. Krishna Paksha is a lunar fortnight during which the moon wanes. Ashtami Tithi is the 8th lunar day. Krishna was born in the month of Bhadra in Krishna Paksha and on Ashtami Tithi. A vrata observed on this day is known as Krishna Ashtami Vrata and brings great punya. There was a king named Chitrasena who performed many evil deeds. He was so evil that he avoided learned people and mingled only with outcasts. Chitrasena once went to the forest on a hunt. Pursuing a tiger, he came to the banks of the sacred river Yamuna. The day happened to be Krishna's birthday, and many apsaras were observing Krishna Ashtami Vrata on the banks of the Yamuna. On witnessing this, the king felt like observing the religious rite himself. Thanks to the punya thus obtained, King Chitrasena went straight to Vishnuloka after his death, and all his sins were forgiven. Many years ago, in Dvapara Yuga, there was a Shudra named Bhima. He committed so many sins that it is pointless to try and enumerate them. This fellow also went to a Brahmana's house. He resolved that he would steal the Brahmana's property. But to scout out of the place, he pretended to be a beggar. "I am very hungry, please give me some food to eat," Bhima said. "There is no one else in the house," replied the Brahmana. I do not have parents, wife or children. There is no one here who can cook some food for you. Why don't you help yourself to some rice and cook your own food? I too have no one, said Bhima. I will stay here and serve you. All this was really an act. Bhima was looking for an opportunity to enter the house so that he might steal the Brahmana's property. But once he began to live in the house, Bhima saw no reason to hurry. Life with the Brahmana was very comfortable. There was no hurry in stealing the property. That could easily be stolen whenever Bhima wanted. But living with the Brahmana, Bhima began to serve the Brahmana in a little ways. He cooked food and washed the Brahmana's feet. All this led to a lot of punya. One night a chief entered the house. Bhima tried to prevent the chief from stealing, but while he was fighting with the chief sliced off Bhima's head with a sword. As soon as Bhima died, Vishnu's messengers arrived to take Bhima to Vishnuloka. All his sins had been forgiven. Such are wonderful effects of serving Brahmanas. Hemaprabha. Ekadashi is the 11th day of the lunar fortnight. If one fasts on Ekadashi Tithi and performs religious rites, that is known as Ekadashi vrata. That is very sacred. Many years ago, a man named Vallabha lived in the city of Kanchana. Vallabha's wife was Hemaprabha. Vallabha was rich and prosperous, but he was not happy. The reason for his unhappiness was his wife. Hemaprabha did not obey his husband and quarreled with him all the time. One particular day, Vallabha could stand it no more. He gave his wife a sound thrashing. This angered Hemaprabha so much that she retired to her bedroom and refused to touch food or water. She fasted throughout the day. As luck would have it, she died during the night. The day had happened to be Ekadashi, and Hemaprabha had therefore fasted on Ekadashi Tithi. This brought her a lot of punya. When Hemaprabha died, Yama's messengers arrived and tried to take the woman to Yama's abode. But Vishnu's companions also arrived and they would not permit this to be done. Such was Hemaprabha's punya that she was destined to live with Vishnu in Vishnuloka. Such are the wonderful effects of observing Ekadashi Vrata. There are a few more stories in the Padma Purana which are more or less repetitions of the ones that have just been told. There seems to be no point therefore in repeating this. In Treta Yuga there lived a Brahmana named Sudarshana. He always criticized the Vedas, never observed any vratas and thought only of himself. When he died, he spent several years in hell before being born as a pig. The pig was born as a crow in its next birth. An image of Vishnu had been washed with the water, and the crow happened to drink some of this water. The result was that Sudarshana was pardoned all his sins and ascended to heaven. Also in Treta Yuga there lived a man named Shankara, who was a resident of kingdom of Surashtra. Shankara's wife was called Kalipriya. Kalipriya did not love her husband at all, and quarreled with him all the time. She never cooked her husband any good food and kept wishing for the day when the husband would die. When this showed no signs of happening, Kalipriya herself killed Shankara so that she might be free. When her husband died, Kalipriya went to a different city. By a quirk of fate, she began to associate with those who were devotees of Vishnu. She observed several vratas and this brought her a lot of punya. The power of the punya was such that when Kalipriya died, she was taken straight to Vishnuloka. All her things were forgotten. In Dwapara Yuga there was Brahmana named Aditya. The tulasi basil tree is a sacred to Vishnu. Aditya watered a tulasi tree and went home. There was also an outcast Chandala at that place. The Chandala felt very thirsty. Not finding any other water to drink, the outcast drank some of the water from the root of the tulasi tree. There was an act that brought great punya. Subsequently, the outcast was killed by a hunter named Asimardana. But the outcast had performed an act of great piety in drinking the sacred water. All his sins were forgiven. Among these things was the sin of abducting a woman in an earlier life. It was because of this that he had been born as a Chandala. That his sin too was now forgiven, and the Chandala was taken to Vishnuloka by Vishnu's companions. In Treta Yuga, there lived a Shudra named Dandakara. He criticized the Vedas, ate beef, drank wine, lied heavily, and committed many other things. He was so evil that all his friends and relatives shunned him. Dandakara took to living in the forest and became a dacoit there. He robbed and killed people. In this pursuit he once encountered a group of Brahmins who were devoted to Vishnu, and these devotees pursued Dandakara to observe a vrata. All Dandakara's sins were forgiven as a result of this observance. The Padma Purana is a sacred text. A person who hears the recital of the one shloka from this text is forgiven whatever sins he may commit in the space of a single day. A lot of punya can be obtained by donating 1,000 cows to brahmanas. But equivalent amount of punya can be obtained by simply listening to the recital of one chapter from the Padma Purana. The performance of an Ashwamedha yajna brings enormous punya. But in Kali Yuga, the same amount of punya can be obtained by listening to a recital of the entire Padma Purana. A recital of this text is far better than performing tapasya or donating alms in terms of the rewards obtained. I hope you have not forgotten that it was Lomaharshana who recited the Padma Purana to assembled sages. The sages were immensely satisfied with what they had. Having thanked Lomaharshana, they departed their various way. Om Shakti Hrim, Om Namah Shivaya Om Namo Narayana, Hari Om Tat Sat.